When President Trump celebrated the 6-month anniversary of signing the tax cut legislation recently, our next guest was right beside him at the event. That's because Alfredo Ortiz and his Job Creators Network small business group was a driving force in lobbying Congress to pass that legislation. Alfredo is here today to talk about what has happened since that tax bill passed and what is next on the legislative horizon for small businesses. Alfredo, great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start with, why did you want this to get passed? Why did you think that this was the right thing for small businesses for this tax cut to go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, thank you for having me. One of the things that we found, we did a survey of small businesses about 3 years ago, and we found that overregulation, too much red tape, overtaxation, and the lack of access to capital and credit were the three main things that were keeping our small businesses behind in this country and really keeping them up late at night, wondering how they're going to get through this. And so that was one of the biggest reasons, and the overtaxation element was their number one issue. And so we actually started a campaign about 3 years ago called the Bring Small Business Back campaign, and we decided that that was one of the best ways to do is try to hit this tax piece head on.
What does that mean when you say businesses are overtaxed, right? How is a small business taxed? What are some of the ways that they needed relief?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I don't think a lot of people realize this, but in many cases, 50 cents of every dollar was being taxed, was being sent to Washington, D.C., to the government out of every single dollar earned. So these hardworking Americans, small business
these are
owners,
not fat cats.
These are family businesses,
sole proprietors.
I mean, we're talking the dry cleaner, the pizza guy. These guys were working their buns off, really, quite frankly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trying to make things really work for themselves, and everything that they put on the line, and 50 cents out of every dollar in many cases going back to the government. So they needed relief, and they hadn't seen relief in almost 40 some odd years. So this tax bill, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that passed, was the biggest relief they had seen in about 41 years.
And how has that impacted hiring? What are some of the secondary effects, the additional add-ons of, other than these businesses being able to stay in business and feed their families with the money they're taking out? But what's happened for folks that are looking for small businesses as job creators?
Well, the one greatest thing is that optimism among small business owners is sky high now. And they were able to really take one of the biggest parts immediately, which is immediate expensing is what it's called. And they're able to invest in these into their machinery and equipment, whether it's a new truck for delivery or a new printing machine, for example, and they're able to reinvest back in their businesses. Along with that reinvestment, they also brought in higher wages for their workers, in many cases higher benefits, and of course more employees. And so this was really great for the economy. So this 4.1% GDP growth that we just saw, a lot of that really is due to the investment that small business owners are doing back into their business.
And now, what should the way forward be for the Trump administration? People have already started to talk about another round of tax cuts. What would you like to see happen?
That's right, yeah. So we've heard Chairman Brady, for example, talk about Tax Cut 2.0, which is really an investment back into the economy, making permanent the individual piece. But again, on the small business side for Main Street America is really making those permanent as well. And the Tax Cut and Jobs Act last year, what happened, it was a great first step in the right direction, but we really do believe that there's still more room for small businesses to benefit from that. So what we would love to see is, again, the permanency on those tax cuts for small businesses. Other industries, for example, that may have been left off of the first round, like service industries, to be included, and maybe a little bit better on the deduction piece, which right now is about 20-something%. We'd like to see that go up a little bit more.
Certainly the tax piece of this, as you've been saying, really important for small businesses. What about the regulatory environment? That's something that I've heard from a lot of folks that are operating in what I just referred to generally as commerce, that it's a lot better now.
Yeah, that's right. So in fact, I think the regulatory relief that President Trump started on almost immediately was one of the biggest booms to the economy right off the bat. We all heard that he had promised 2 regulations off the table for everyone introduced. They're now at about 22 regulations off the table for everyone introduced. That had an immediate impact on the economy. Some estimates had that, I believe 2 years ago, the latest estimate that I saw, regulations cost our economy about $1.6 trillion per year. So any relief on that front is going to be huge. So right off the bat, the anti-regulatory environment that President Trump established in the administration has been big. And then you add on top of that the tax relief that both large businesses and small businesses are seeing, and individuals as well.
What are the best states right now for a small business to get started?
Yes.
Generally speaking, I know every business is different, but what are the best states in terms of?
So where we're seeing the states that probably are generally perceived as better and friendlier to businesses, both small and large, are those that are controlled by Republican legislators.
So Texas, Colorado,
yeah, Texas,
what are some
Georgia.
of the ones that,
I mean, these are some of the best ones. The worst probably are that we're seeing is California, for example, New York, Connecticut. These are some problem states from a tax standpoint.
So things right now looking pretty good going forward. Do you think the Trump administration is going to be able to point to small business as one of the successes of the administration?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I actually call this president really the small business president because he has done more for small businesses than any administration, any president that I've seen, at least in the past several decades. Again, between the hitting the regulation elements of it, the overtaxation element, and then the small business lending piece of that. Dodd-Frank, which was introduced several years ago under the Obama administration, ended up leading to killing about 2,000 plus community banks, a lot of them in rural areas. And so that has now been relieved through some of the regulation that just recently passed.
All right, Alfredo, thank you so much for joining. We appreciate your
Thank you very much.
perspective on all this.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Got more Rising coming up. Stay with us.